first one. Before I start introducing our speakers, I would like to give another promotion as we will have a second conversation, which is a competition between one of our guest curator of the case study, Simon Soon, and a Taiwanese our critique curator, Gong Jing, by the end of May 25th, and it will be really great if you can join us as well. So today we are very honored to have three guests here today with us, and together with Qu Chang. She'll be the moderator today. And so this conversation today we were taking a departure from where you are here with us today, which is a case study curated by Qu Chang about the land and the rice. So today, together with Qu Chang, we have here with us is Holok Chen. Holok is currently the executive secretary of Student Christian Movement of Hong Kong. He was also the former member of Hong Kong Land Justice League. And then in the middle we have Lalai. She's the artist and also one of the artists in this case study where you can see here is the Weather Girl. Hello Daisy is the work by Lalai. Lalai is currently also the member of Sawangwongse. And the next one we have Michael Leung. Michael is an artist, designer, and urban planner, and he founded Hong Kong Farm in 2012, which is an organization dedicated to the benefits of locally produced food and promoting rooftop farming. And so today with Qu Chang, the curator of this session, we would like to talk about the importance of farming movement and architectural practice in Hong Kong and the politics of it. So without further ado, I will hand the mic to Qu Chang.
Hi everyone, thank you all for coming. Before the talk, I have a question because we were thinking whether to do the talk in English or Cantonese. After all, we are discussing a very local issue. So does any one of you that don't understand Cantonese, please raise your hand. Okay, the English now. First of all, I'd like to give a very brief introduction to this research station that we are doing that is focusing on Hong Kong. The title of this research station is Detail, the Land of Fish and Rice. The idea of this research station stems from an article written by Qu Chang, a local political activist and a writer. And in the beginning of that article, Qu Chang raised this point of Tanka people, also known as Bo people. They're the people from southern part of China, as the original inhabitant of Hong Kong. And they are actually the group of people that forms this local culture of Hong Kong that is a marine culture, which is significantly different from the mainland culture that is mainly related to Confucianism. And this defines the Hong Kong characteristic that is largely different from China. And from that, I started my interest in looking into this water life of Hong Kong, and from that you can see on this side of the exhibition, we look into some of the legends in Hong Kong that includes the half-fish, half-human creature floating, and some history of how the name of Hong Kong is coming from, and we also took some archival footages from the Under the Lying Mountain and a TV commercial by HSBC on the water people. We also include one work by Trevor Young. It's a cactus made from a blowfish, connecting this idea of half water and half land. And on the other side, we want to look to a more contemporary issue, which is this agriculture movement in Hong Kong that's happening starting from early 2000. And in the middle of the exhibition, we moved the sculpture away, but we actually created this traditional shrine of Hong Kong, and we put like traditional Canton theater in the middle to indicate that this whole room is a space of imagination, and to look at a nation or a community. Usually, when you're building a history or building an for a community or a nation, it's usually based on imagination, from pieces that you took from history and to create your own history, your own story. So this is basically the idea of this research station. And today we're going to focus on this side of the show, so the agriculture part. By preparing the exhibition, I have a lot of questions that is unanswered for the moment, and I want to raise this question for the moment, and this will be the center point of our discussion today, which is why, started from early 2000, agriculture has become a movement in Hong Kong, because losing farmland is not something that only happened recently. It has been happening starting from the 60s and 70s. Why suddenly Hong Kong people started to focusing on agriculture? Why young people moved to new territories to do farming? And this is something that we're going to talk about today. But first of all, I would like to introduce, or to have our three talkers to introduce their own practices that is very much related to agriculture. First, maybe Bob, you can first talk about your research.
Oh, I thought I would be the last.
Hello. Okay. My humble presence here is only to help everyone to understand a little bit more of Parasite's project, and also Lai's and Michael's project. When dealing with Hong Kong's agriculture and political movement, it always comes in the form of irony and conflicts and puzzles, because Hong Kong has been long regarded as a metropolitan financial center. A few years back, there was a Chinese agricultural expert who specialized in Sannong province, the three agricultural provinces in China. He basically was in charge of the whole nationwide agricultural policy, and he came to Hong Kong, and he was shocked to find out that there are farmers in Hong Kong, and he said, well, if he knew that there are farmers in Hong Kong, maybe he would have different thoughts in Hong Kong's resistance in recent years, that they knew so little about Hong Kong. Being the expert, the chair in the position of nationwide agricultural policy. And I'm sure the same happens to each and one of you, and even for me as someone who grew up in this city and educated here. It was only until recently that I learned so much about local agriculture. And so what I do is to share with you guys my findings in terms of policies and the formations of the circumstances and conditions we see nowadays. First of all, I would like to introduce a little bit about myself. I'm a post-80s youth in Hong Kong. So the term post-80s comes with a movement called the Anti-Express Railway movement, where we oppose to the building and the construction of the nationwide express railway extending to Hong Kong. So, oh, thank you. So sweet. So this is, here we are. So you see that this purple line is the express railway, and the terminal would be in West Kowloon, and it triggered a massive protest in local young generations. And it's not only a movement that tries to stop a mega project by the government. It is also a process of self-discovery and revelation. Because for my generations, we have been grew up apathetic in almost a post-apocalyptic turnover condition of Hong Kong. We see the last train of economic development, and we see our futures shattered, and we don't really see a clear direction of where this city is heading to. To be honest, Hong Kong is a lot like a time capsule, in the best sense. Like everything is so stagnated, and you seldom see a city or a nation has capitalism written into their constitution, and we do. Capitalism is written in the basic law that Hong Kong will run in a capitalistic way, not any other. So it's a closed question. So you can pretty much see how doomed we are, and these I will introduce you later. It has a lot to do with our self-discovery. So my position in this process is at the same time an activist, and at the same time a someone who is in a journey of self-discovery and hoping to find true ownership of this city. And so this is what I do. So I have been talking to these guys, and they are the main characters, and yeah, they should be in the spotlight. What I do is I will take questions regarding the Hong Kong's land policy formations. One point I would say, there are two concepts that I will bring forward tonight. The first concept would be that Hong Kong is yet to be decolonized. So we have not experienced a decolonization process, unlike our fellows in Africa and in other parts of Asia. So that was the first thing. We are yet to experience a decolonization process. The second thing is that the irony that the localism and the people who are pro-independence nowadays are born and raised in a city that is ruled by China. So this is the irony that we have to keep in mind, that all these conflicts that we see is a new phenomenon, and we are opening to the future. So all these localizing movement is actually a call of an alternative future. And so we were just talking about how impractical it is to talk about agriculture in Hong Kong, because when you do the calculation, it's quite not possible to exceed a more than 40% self-sustained rate of food in this city. But agriculture is often served as metaphor and symbol for self-deterministic movements and the will and determination of an alternative value. And so I will also contribute the historical background of local agriculture, which has a lot to do with the turning over of sovereignty in 1997. And in the 90s, there is this frog mentalism. I'm incapable of expressing it precisely in English. In Cantonese, it would be a gap guai sometime. That means that have you ever seen a frog swim? Anyone? So a frog swim like this. So that is Hong Kong people in the early 90s. What it means is you grab as much as money with your yeah, with your arms, and then you jump away, jump to other points, and that's Hong Kong people. But that's not us anymore. We are here to stay, and we still see that there is another future of this city. The picture behind is the express railways ventilation building. And I'm not sure if you are aware that there are a lot of farming villages in new territories. And this is one of them, one of the oldest. It's called Naupame. And what happens is that the building of the express railway not only blurred the boundary of Hong Kong, but it also destroys the local source of water resources. I will show a little bit of clips here. So
大家好，我係 SCMHK 嘅陳可樂。大家身處呢個地方係喺錦田八鄉嘅東江水輸水管。呢一條咁大咁長嘅輸水管一望無際。喺上年2001。
This is actually a VR clip that I did earlier. This is the Leung, the East River water pipe that provided about 85% of Hong Kong's water consumption. And it was built in the 80s before the turnover. And this, at the end of this year, there will be a renewal of contract of this water supply. Hong Kong has been very reliant on the supply of water from mainland China. But here, you can hear the water. Okay. So, if you hear the water sound here, they're actually pumping out 6 tons of underground water from the site that I just showed you, from the ventilation area. So basically what it did was that it caused drought in the village, and many of the fishermen and farmers there couldn't access to the underground water that they relied on their daily consumption and their economic activities, and then they are forced to seek other jobs apart from farming. And this is what we are doing to our own natural environment and own water source. And so in this process, and these stories I can tell you like 100 of it in Hong Kong, and we are really only starting to gain more concern on our own natural resources and to see it as something important. Because in the past, because of the fraud mentality, Hong Kong people had never paid attention to how we can sustain ourselves and our duty as a global citizen in preserving the world's water resources and natural resources, and we just treat it as something that treated in a colonizer mentality is very interesting. Like we are a colony, but we install the eyes and minds of the colonizers ourselves to ruin our lands in a very blindfold way. And so I wish I wouldn't take up a lot of time here. So I'll pass the mic first, and then the questions will come back to me later. Because what I will try to make a point is that Lai Lai is a fascinating story and very amazing farmer. And what she does, you can see a lot of resemblance between her and our counterparts in Taiwan and Japan. but the very conditions are very different. And before I pass the mic again, or you let me go. Because we were talking about like how the local movement has a lot to do with agriculture. This is a poster and actually a collection of manifestos given to the protesters and demonstrators in 2010. And that was after the Queen's Pier demolition. And it's written by a group of young people back then who are really fed up with the capitalistic Hong Kong's only way of life. And you can see here is a non-existent representation of Hong Kong people. Hong Kong people never relate to this guy in a farming practice. And even those who come up with these manifestos, none of them are living in this form of life. But this imagination started to materialize by many, many activists and actions, people like Lai Lai, and become a real alternative, and how, no matter how few of them, that becomes something substantial and realistic. And so I think this poster really served as a very good document and also a good start for tonight's discussion. Yeah, pass the mic to you.
Since Holok mentioned the express railway that's connecting Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Hong Kong, I know that when they actually went to farming after the Charming Village event. So maybe you can start by introducing how you becoming a farmer and your practice with some.
Thanks for those very resourceful materials and backgrounds. And as Holok and Gogo mentioned about the sort of anti-express train railway that is derived from Guangzhou and Shenzhen and Guangzhou to Hong Kong. And actually, at that time, I was a travel journalist. Actually, I got training in bachelor degree, but I wanted to be a travel journalist for a few years. And actually, the period gave me quite a reflection on the identity, because my job is to promoting other countries' good benefits and the goodness of the other country and cities. But I was questioning, how about in my city? Or I'm going to question about why I should be, as a Hong Kong citizen. That's the questions at the time. And also as an artist, what should I do as an art making, and what is the really crucial materials element I want. So at that time, I was as Holok said, mentioned about a group of young people post-80s, and I'm post-80s too. My friends, they are really passionate, and they are in the higher the post-80s. They reformer group actually.
Really?
Yeah, actually. And I mean, at that time, because I was close to them, so we are in the movement, and we are thinking that the protest actually eliminating lots of alternative lifestyle in Hong Kong, such as Choi Yun Chun, the core village that we want to protest. And so in the movement, we try to think about how about we go to practice the alternative lifestyle, the farming lifestyle in Hong Kong. Because besides just wearing the empty slogan, I want to have authentic lifestyle, but none of us were farmers, or none of us know the village life. So that's why my friend and I, we are forming a collective group called Sawangwongse. Literally is livelihood place in Hong Kong, and that was in a place, the old village. I can show you some picture. You can actually, not really Facebook, but I put it on the desktop of the computer. So, but that time, that's pretty fluctuating, because on the other hand, we have to do patrolling and also to dealing with those MTR staff and government, and also doing the aesthetic style in the level. So, but on the other hand, we started learn farming. So this is really contradictory, because there's in a social movement, there may be numerous certain events happen, and it may arouse your, it's kind of losing energy, or you're really burning out. Yeah. And on the other hand, we started learn farming. That is the way that you really reveal your own self, your living style, and what food you consume, what kind of life you're practicing, and it will help me to open the own choice program. So, that's looping of photos. So it was the, I took some pictures, but you can see I didn't really took the concrete, or it's more of the picture, most of the people there. So many of the other outsiders, we were supporters to Choyin village, but actually only few of them were in the group. We stayed with the villagers and did patrolling. At that moment, when we are looking back to the events, I think the physical establishment of the village may not be that important, but it aroused the question to many of us that what kind of lifestyle we can really have, or we can be more self-sustainable. So one of the solutions is farming and food, because it's Harry Kissinger, and he mentioned about if you control the food, you control the world. So actually for many of the people, one of the very primitive desire is eating. So, and that's why my friend and I, we formed the Sawangwongse, and I want to have another folder, Sawangwongse folder. But the old village was demolished, so the villagers they bought another land. And Qu Chang Road is the new Choyin village. And Sawangwongse, my friend and I, we rent another piece of land along Qu Chang Road, the Shekong area. So this is the picture I would like to show, because it's really directly present what we are doing. We grow rice, we produce the harvest from time to time. And we keep the same pictures. Yeah, but you can see behind the rice field, there was a construction site. It was actually the construction site of the NT high-speed train railway. I couldn't say did achieving the self-sustainability. We still are buying lots of products, but it's kind of metaphor because growing-wise, the primitive crops, primitive food for the Chinese, in front of those construction, the developments in Hong Kong, it's a metaphor and signal to ourselves how we can grab our own future. Can we be self-sustainable? And that's the question that's come to me and my friend. And also as an artist, I'm also thinking about, can an artist live in a self-sustainable style? If I don't have chance to live that exhibit in on an artwork, or if I don't have chance to have art projects, can I be more self-sustainable? That's the question that's come up in my mind. So I think this is, I really cherish the time that I had movement, and this brought me a lot of questions. And I briefly want to share with you the living style that my friend and I are practicing now. Because it's called half farming, half eggs, the living style. Actually, many of you, it's quite popular now in Hong Kong. Because the instructor, the farming instructor of Sawangwongse Yawnghwe, he brought the idea to us. It is not his idea, but the living style advocated by a Japanese writer, now being growing in the late 1990s. So that is pretty literally, I would like to explain. Half farmers, half farming, that's some of your time is not necessarily as half of your time. You are practicing farming or contacting with nature, and you produce your own food. For other part, eggs is your calling. That is your ability and what you have to do or like to do to benefit the society, and also your own callings to be in the world. Yeah. And so this is. I can't say this is a solution to all these complicated policy or all these difficult social problems we face, because as an individual, you can't solve the problems. And that's the core reason that I think many of us in the social movement, we felt so burning out because we can't solve the problem. But as an individual, you can't really solve it. You can only solve your own problems. To the discovery, as Holok said about, is around the self-discovery journey of each of us. And so the eggs, some people, actually the writer, he put it eggs as a cross. Actually, it means something else. Or the eggs, the two strong, being the intersection of your own self as an individual and also the society. So this is, I think, thinking about how to make a living or the relations between those society and individual. These two aspects or questions, I think, to me, are the main question of many artists or cultural people, because we always think can we benefit the society, but on the other hand, can we do what we want to do, and can we make a living? So that's why I propose actually for many artists they should practice farming, because I would like to tell more about the relation between farming. Because once you get contact with farming and the nature, you might get different, you may get another inspiration from nature, and it's strengthen your empathy on the other people and also the other surroundings. So I propose that every other should do something related to farming, but they don't need to do an artwork directly addressing nature. So that's this. I may share with you later because there's a lot of problem or a lot of story about that. And may I end my little sharing at this moment with this? So that's why that's what actually I mentioned about the full screen version. I'm not going to share with you those ecological view of nature because I know that's kind of cliche or old-fashioned saying. But that's the graphic I come up in mind when I practice half farming, half lives. When I think art or writing, maybe my other half of eggs. I think I come up with these images about eco and ego. Because for the left graphic, and I guess I don't need to explain because yes, it is about how we have a sustainable world and how we preserve the world. But when I come up with the right one, I thought, oh, that's an artist. So for most of the time, artists, our ego is pretty high. But I'm not saying that every artist should lower down the ego, because in the several years of progress of what I do farming and also making artwork, I found that I can't lift my ego, because when you are doing farming, your calling will be back, and no matter you are a writer or you are an artist or you are even a dentist, your calling will be back. And that is, I think, I'm going to discover how I can position in my ego in the ecosystem. Yes, but this is, I may draw another graphic for this, a kind of more realistic situation that I think we can do. Yes. So that is, so my friend and I, we practice farming and it's a similar cultural
These are the rice.
Yeah, these are the rice, the paddy field. I can say we have different backgrounds, although we are from a similar cultural sector, and each of us we are going to research about our own eggs, because some of us, for example, Chow, I didn't really shoot the face. Chow, the man, the guy, and he's doing the PhD of cultural study in Yunnan University. He's more academic person that he studied about Hong Kong farming, and the other members, they are like a designer or doing education, art education on photography. So each of us, we are going to explore our own other eggs, how farming and nature inspires.
Can I cut in a little bit here?
Yeah, sure.
The point about paddy is quite political, you know, because in Hong Kong, when you look at the farmers that are being affected nowadays, they are not rice farmers. They are usually the farmers that grows vegetables, pak choys, and lettuce, those kinds of crops. And paddy is a practice that is long diminished in Hong Kong. Hong Kong was once famous for its paddy in the 1930s by nowadays we call them indigenous people, but the content is very different from the international conception of indigenous people. But anyways, so paddy was very prevalent in Hong Kong in the 30s by those occupants, residents in new territories. But they diminished mainly because of the residents migrated to mostly Dutch lands, Netherlands, or England, and they went deserted. It was only after the Second World War when the British government literally spread leaflets across the Victoria Harbour by helicopter to urge the refugees from the war to go into the new territories to farm. And because back then, if you look at many of the industrial buildings, on top of them are the temporary structures. We call them the rooftop houses. And those are built by the refugees flooding into the city. And it caused a huge problem for the British government, colonial government back then. So one of the resolutions was to channel them into the vast farmlands of new territories. And they become the slums and temporary structures. And the British government tolerated that because they are really solving the problems by residing in the new territories. And they brought together with them the techniques, the expertise of farming lettuce and vegetables. And they used it like Punsheng, Nanhai, Panyu, Sunde way. And nowadays we call them the permaculture practice. And this practice is actually like forgotten or get lost along the way of cultural revolution. And by the 1980s, when the local farmers who still possess of these farming techniques went back to China, they find that their old towns have already forgotten how to farm. And so these techniques are preserved here, but the choice of paddy here by the new generations of farmers who are not refugees, who are born and raised here, in my opinion, is doing a political gesture because paddy is a strong symbolism of food and life, and they show the how determined they are to provide a self-sustained life. And rice is exactly the symbolic objects that they held during the long march of the anti-express railway protest. The young people back then, each of them had a handful of grain in their hands to symbolize that they wish that they can provide for their own sustainability in the future. So I think this picture really nicely sums it up.
Yeah, so I think it's time for that we can go back later from what I did.
I just talked about how this human contact with nature can be used as like a spiritual exercise. And for Hong Kong, it's a very urbanized city. I can guess it's a very new experience for a lot of people to go to new territories and to practice farming. And we have Michael here who worked mainly on urban farming, and his group, Hong Kong Farm. We have a Hong Kong farmer almanac here in the exhibition that is produced by Michael's group, Hong Kong Farm. It's a collection of farming instruction and researches on local farming group as well as farming group from outside of Hong Kong. So can you introduce a little bit of your own practice as well as your current research on the dance movement?
Okay. Hello everyone. So yeah, Freya and Chang mentioned Big Farm. It's a collective of three of us, Glenn and Anthony. And in 2014, 15, we worked on an art residency project at Spring Workshop, and together with other farmers, including Holok and Leung, we published the Hong Kong Farmers Almanac 2014 to 15. And unfortunately, after that, we became a bit drained from the process. It's quite exhaustive publishing this document or this farming publication, and I also had this kind of like recalibration of farming practices that I personally have an interest and affinity with. And during that time, I guess maybe 2013, I met a guerrilla homeless farmer called Mango King in Kowloon, who is farming on public space around 6,000 square feet. And he had been farming there and living there for like 1 or 2 years, and then now it's come up to 4 years. And like just to kind of continue on from like this idea of like the self-discovery. Actually, I should mention I'm also like from the UK, and I came to Hong Kong in 2009. So unfortunately, I was still very fresh when I arrived. I caught elements of the anti-express rail movement. Yeah, to go back to this kind of idea of self-discovery and self-transformation, working with Mango King really kind of made me rethink the idea of public space, practicing autonomy, especially in this really capitalistic, cutthroat city that's Hong Kong, where many people might be perhaps 2 paychecks away from being homeless, and himself being homeless and practicing his right to the common land. And I guess this was like a slow kind of like build-up. I became more and more involved with working with him and creating some like zines and publications to disseminate his work. And this led me on to, I guess, participating or being relatively active with a land protest movement last year, which is just left of the Lololai's video artwork, which is situated in Fanlang in a village called Marsipo village. And it's quite a long history, but just to kind of give a brief introduction. In 1996, a property developer called Henderson Property Development Limited started acquiring farmland, registered agricultural land. And this was like a really strange thing for them to do.
These are the Northeast New Territories. So yeah, this particular village is part of the Northeastern New Territories Development Plan imposed by the government in 2008. And even though there was like 50,000 letters of against this development of the farmland, and only 7 in favour, the government still allows it to go through. So it's very much out of the public's hands, and it led to this, I guess, short 2.5-month farm resistance movement, which ended up being a land occupation for 2.5 months, with many security guards intervening, often several times, 150 security guards from 3 or 4 security companies were posted on this really small piece of land, 7,000 square feet. And you can see that there's this structure that's been built, which is roughly 4 by 4 meters and 4 to 6 meters high with a watchtower. This became, I guess, a fortress to reclaim the farmland and also to keep watch over an eviction. And yeah, for some reason actually it was quite lucky that I wasn't teaching that much, and I could spend a lot of time visiting that farmland almost on a daily basis. And I became more and more interested in this land acquisition, legal land acquisition, and how the government colludes with developers to turn agricultural land into commercial land for either residential, unaffordable apartments, shopping malls, and stuff like that. So
by, I guess, engaging with this 2.5 months, I went through a process of self-discovery and even, I would say, self-transformation, and became more and more interested in other farm squatting movements around the world, or more bottom-up farming practices on public space, and also liberating unused land for farming or community farming purposes. And there's a zine at the back with the structure. You guys can pass it around if you like. I'm not sure if it's there. Oh, yeah, that's the one. So I guess my research has kind of brought me to looking at different farm squatting communities, which I've, I guess, nicknamed as insurrectionary farming milieu. And it's really about translating these farm-resistant movements around the world and having them kind of available to the public to really take notes, share tactics and strategies from. And so at the time when I was visiting Marseille a lot, I would often do research and see what like the Zapatistas are doing, or other farm squats like Revital in London, and also farm I guess community-based projects happening in like New York and also in Italy. And so this kind of farm squatting, or farm against the commodification of farmland movement, global movement, I guess, yeah, I'm kind of acting as a messenger and distributing this knowledge or these practices in the form of zines and sharing it with other villages. There's another village which you guys might have seen in the news recently, where in called Wangzhou, and the Hong Kong Free Press just released an article like yesterday or today relating to the 200 villagers that will likely be made homeless this Friday. So I'm also involved in sharing some of the stuff that we learned from the farming movement last year and globally as well. So I guess, yeah, this interest is like growing, and I'm happy to kind of share it with you guys. And yeah, I guess that's it.
Okay, I want to go back to the question that I raised at the beginning of this talk. Why is there a agricultural turn in Hong Kong right now, and is agriculture an efficient tool to solve the anxiety that we're having right now? I actually have some answers myself. I made them into bullet points that I want to share with you guys, and I think you can, from different perspectives, give me some response. The first thing I would say is definitely the land policy in Hong Kong. I have this number here. So in all of Hong Kong's land, only 6.2% of them are farmland, and in the farmland, this 6.5% of farmland, only 1/3 of them are in use. All the others are like discarded farmland. So definitely the farmland policy, the land policy in Hong Kong has a very big issue. And the second part is also obvious, is political tension between China and Hong Kong, especially when we're talking about the Northeast Development Plan. You can see that it's like Shenzhen. Should I think?
I don't think that's the appropriate word.
But like, it's approaching Hong Kong in a way. And then the third part would be, from Lele's point of view, a very personal perspective. Under this high urban pressure, young people are looking forward to enter nature, to see the other side of living, to escape from this urban pressure. And also we have this very globally recognized concern with ecology and with sustainability of life as well. So I want to start with the land policy in Hong Kong with Holok.
Yes. I think the number that you just mentioned, that Hong Kong has so little usage of farmland, is not a usual phenomenon. As I said, Hong Kong was once famous for its paddies and many other crops. We have our own original species of crops that's very famous. But it all came with the 1988 Sheng Fa'an, the court case between the current chairperson of the Rural Consultation Bureau and the government over the usage of farmland, because the British government back then was against the using of farmland as container site, and they had a court case with a farmland owner, but the court ruled that since it is a private property right of the farmland owner, he or she is entitled to do whatever they please on top of the farmland. And that's why you see after the 1988 and especially the early 90s, there is a massive spread of brownfields, and mainly as container sites and car parks all over new territories. And the farmlands are not competitive enough in terms of economic returns with container sites. And you can basically see a massive drop of farmland in a decade or so. So that's one situation. Another situation is since the 80s, the four main real estate developers in Hong Kong has been purchasing farmlands for future investments. So they are speculating that in the future there will be a massive development in new territories. So the real estate developers in Hong Kong literally own more land than the government. That's true. And in the case of Michael just mentioned, Ma Po Po or Ma Shi Po is a refugee, basically a refugee village in Hong Kong. Yeah, one point to add, in the farmers' resistance in Hong Kong, basically they were all refugees from war. And so this village was purchased plot by plot over the span of a decade, and now is more than 80% owned by Henderson Land. And we have looked into the planning. It's very interesting. Usually is that the planning department would do the planning before, and then maybe the developers would join in and then to see how they can develop the plot of land. But we can see that the developers' planning came before the government's planning, and they are over 80% similar. So we are really like very reasonably speculate that it is the real estate developer who is leading the direction of the planning and development in Hong Kong's territories. And the third issue, the second issue would be the capitalism. The third issue would be the regional planning. Since the turnover, Hong Kong had been a part of the 5-year plan. So if you are aware that 5-year plan is something that the Soviet Union does. And after the turnover, we have a very awkward situation. Since we are one country, two systems, so we have this capitalism city, and on the counterpart is a communist country, right? And the communist country plan their developments according to 5-year plans. And Hong Kong, for some reason, are included in the 12 5-year plans. So if you look at the map here, I'm quite sure you are unable to recognize Hong Kong. And let me show you this here. So Hong Kong is here. And these maps are from the 12 5-year plans published by the Chinese government. And you see they have certain idea of how Hong Kong should develop in the future. And of course it included the express railway development. But as I mentioned at the beginning, the officials have no clue and no idea what is actually happening in Hong Kong. So they are really planning by speculations and by guessing. And the point is, these plannings are never suited the best interests of the local people, on their views of Hong Kong's independence. And guess what country is the most supportive of Hong Kong's independence? Anyone?
Singapore.
Yeah, some say Singapore. India. No. Or how about the least supportive of Hong Kong's independence, who wish that Hong Kong would not be independent at all?
China.
Nice guess. The most supportive of Hong Kong's independence is Japan. Japan was so supportive that they even drafted a three-China diplomatic policy. So in time of Hong Kong's declaration of independence, they would immediately build up a diplomatic relationship with Hong Kong as the third China. And the least supportive one would be Indonesia. And they were so unsupportive, so much that they wished that Hong Kong would just become another Chinese city without any distinction, so that they can have one few competitor in the developing Southeast Asia economy. And the point I'm trying to make is that Hong Kong was never in that process, and Hong Kong is merely a bargaining chip in the interest of the British government back then. Thatcher was really hoping that in this process they can pave way for the business developments and trading deals in China after it opens up the market in the 80s. So what we see here is in the turnover process, the Chinese government was basically thinking, oh, since the British government can rule without democracy, why not us? So their conception of a turnover is pretty much like, oh, for example, if Lai Lai is Hong Kong, so we cut away the British head, replace with a Chinese one. So, and without democracy. But I can grant you higher level of autonomy, and I can grant you your economic rights. I can even have capitalism written into your basic law. So they were thinking, it's an easy job, I should, and guess what? We have 50 years to practice that. So we had 50 years to deal with the rejections. But head transplant is the most difficult surgery ever in the world. So we can see a lot of incompatible within the process, signified by the development of the express railway. And so this is the Northeast New Territories development, and you can see, if you see from the map, so there aren't anything here. So this is New Territories in Chinese eyes. So they think that, oh, since there are nothing here, we can just do whatever we want, develop like new towns, and then we can merge with Shenzhen, which is already developed. And they were thinking that there will be a mega city called Xianzhen. Okay, so this is in their planning. But what they ignored is the fact that there are people living here. And in the case of Northeast New Territories, there are over 20,000 people who are going to be affected in the development process, but you cannot see from the map here, let alone like officials in Beijing. They have no idea that Hong Kong has farmlands. And once they come here, they will be pretty shocked. And the fact that these developments are already on their way, the only reaction that we can imagine would be massive demonstrations and resistance. And you can see also from here, this is from the 2030 plus planning the government just published. And a lot of arrows, right? They are always like filled with arrows. And this is a northern economic belt. And here is exactly the spot, the the village that I showed you earlier, Nautame. And Lai Lai's village is somewhere here. Yeah. So they are all like covered by this orange arrow called the modern economic belt. So they already have a future in their mind, and that future is not the same with our future that we envision. And this is, I think this is pretty much the reason why you see like massive demonstrations in recent years, because we have different futures. One last thing is that if you think this Shenzhen invading China notion is a xenophobic one, I would say if you look at individual incidences, individual conflicts, yes, they are xenophobic, but those are just syndromes. It's not the main problem. Like, yeah, and the main problem would be the lack of self-determination in this process, and the conflict between ideologies, and the conflict between like a new sovereign and a newborn sense of decolonization. And that's very awkward. I don't think anywhere in the world has once happened this. Yeah, I have talked to some friends from Nigeria, from Africa. They have a really violent process of decolonization, but they didn't know that Hong Kong was sacrificed in such a way that they were even like ripped out of their right to resist and to install an agency, autonomy, after the colonial British rule.
One thing that I think is interesting to say is the conversation that we had before this public program is that even though this whole research station is built in the indigenous culture anyway, but the complexity of Hong Kong land policy is that basically here, the indigenous people, they are the holder of the land. They are the group of people that are more eager to sell the land to the land developer. And people like the farmers, they are actually the tenant of the land. They're the ones who are struggling, and this is why Holok was saying that this movement is actually the refugee movement instead of the indigenous movement. And these refugees are actually landers coming to Hong Kong during the Second World War, during the Cultural Revolution, and so on.
Yes, and that's why you see the subject of being accused of xenophobia in Hong Kong are themselves refugees, and which is a very interesting situation where I would say the farmers revolt or land movement in Hong Kong is basically a refugee revolt. And as I mentioned, these people that you see are farming nowadays, those who are called non-indigenous people, they are the refugees from 4 waves. The First World War, the Second World War, and then the the Cultural Revolution, and then the Great Famine of Hong Kong. And there was even a trend of fleeing to Hong Kong from Shenzhen in the 70s, where like people who dare to cross the border are shot by the People's Liberation Army. And so that's why if you interview some of those villages and farmers, they all have vivid memories of how they often see like dead bodies flowing down the streams from mainland China. And those are part of the memories of these farmers. And they became farmers here also because they couldn't find a place in the city right here. So when they arrived at Victoria Harbour, they pick up this leaflet saying that you can start a new life in new territories. That would be your new home. And they believed it, and they moved in there, but only to be sacrificed now again with the Chinese infrastructures. And those infrastructures are serving no one's interests. And if you look into the mega projects across the world, you probably know the government can't waste money on mega projects. And those are tools as a financial tools to solving the Chinese capital crisis, that they are uneased in the process of going internationalized, and the international capital, they have to find a place to materialize their capital and financial flow. And Hong Kong is the ideal place. Hong Kong has always been the ideal place for international capital, but in recent years, the main user or customer would be the Chinese capital, and that's why you see a lot of these kind of projects. And more than often, the mechanism would be these developers who use this contract with the government as a mortgage to leverage for more financial liquidity to further invest. And as long as they can pay back in time, then it will be fine. But the problem we see in recent years in the Hong Kong-Shanghai-Macau bridge, or the express railway bridge, express railway construction, is that they cannot pay back because they have been delaying. They didn't do their research good enough. For example, in Ngau Ta Mei, the underground, the village where the underground water is abandoned, they have to pour concrete for 1 year to be able to send workers down underground because it's all water, and they cannot start their construction on time, and that's why they're losing money. So eventually it will become a financial clicking bomb for them. So I'm not sure when this bomb will explode, and it would be I think it will be another revelation for our city.
I want to quickly move the conversation to LA, and can I ask you to introduce your work web a little bit, because I know that you did the work in the farm in New York, and how does this work, and this series of work that you are working on right now related to this half farming, half X concept that you're researching?
For the work that I'm showing here now, actually for like 2 to 3 years, I have been putting something like a CCTV camera. Actually, it was GoPro or even mobile phone, that's handy shooting equipment. I put in the farm, and somehow I look back the footage from time to time. Sometimes I will intentionally place in a framework that I could predict, but sometimes it's just quite random. I look back to it, and actually, I think the working method somehow correlate with my what I was thinking mentally in the farming. Because when you are farming, you may undergo a kind of meditation, or meditation is not an exact word to describe. You are kind of going into another time or view. Actually, it's a time for you to reveal your own self, and a time for you to try to think about how the relation or your hidden part, unsolved problem of your own self. It might be your personal problems. It might be some question you are thinking about how you dealing with the society. So I make the script after I return to the village. I was going to address some the weather phenomenon, the halo that I found in the footage. Actually, I didn't realize that was a halo. It's rainbow round shape things. So the flower itself is called daisy because it was actually the crown daisy, Tong Ho in Cantonese. We have it in hot pot, it's yummy. It's extremely yummy. And it revealed its identity lastly, because the flower blossom is a daisy, it reveals the type of species of the vegetable. The period that I worked in farm, I try to kind of research and see how the nature inspired me to have a reflection, self-reflection. It really, when I was writing the script, I could find it's like a hidden feeling or the hidden message that I would like to talk to myself and to other people. That is, it's kind of medium, I think, for me. So I'm now also doing something more intentionally shooting. For example, I did a clip addressing the utopia because whatever we are talking about is about some idealistic what we are doing as a farmer or what we are doing in Sampoon. We try to have a more kind of idealistic lifestyle we want to be. But I'm also questioning about the utopia, the idea of utopia. Is it really a place, the best place or the ideal place? So the working at the farm gave me a lot of questions that I would like to address it in my art practice.
Can I talk about sex in this session?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Actually, I have a question. Why are you guys here, anyways? Why do you want to learn about Hong Kong? What's so special about this place? I think what's so special about this place is its placement. Abba once said that all appointments in Hong Kong are disappointments. So if you look at Wong Kar-wai's, he surprises you with disappointments. You thought that there would be a happy ending, but there won't be any. And I think in a way we are like reliving the Wong Kar-wai dream. Yeah, in our movements, I always have these images in my head. And if you know Michael, you thought he was a farmer, but if you know the dark side of him, he is also a very expert erotic literature writer. You know, he writes poems. Yeah, he writes poems, and that's what I. Yeah, another episode. And that's what I want to talk about, like the application of erotics and sex symbols in our work and art, and the development of self-autonomy in our city's movement. This is this is a project Michael and I collaborated. It's called Fairy MK. MK stands for Mongkok, and MK Zai stands for the precarious youth in Hong Kong that we see. The street boys, they often dress in very queer ways. And these are the values that I put into our farm. It was in 2014, after a protest, Michael and I decided that we want to do an installation that responds to urban edge, something that relates to the marginalized side of our city. So we picked these Honglao post-war buildings that is about to be demolished by the government. And I live here. I live on the top floor, and we use that rooftop to start a farming project. And you were thinking, oh, it's all nice and green, lifestyle, very artist type. And yes, it is artist style, but we put a twist in it. And I'm going to show you half of our promotion.
社運發嘅街道之上。
So this was part of our promotion video, and you see in it, of course, the landscapes of Mongkok. That was actually one of the oldest Chinese community after the Victoria City, and that is central nowadays. And you see the pink lights, and those are the brothels in Hong Kong. So my farm was located on top of the brothels, and whenever we pass by, the pimps actually invite us in to take a seat and chat a bit. So I really witnessed a lot of the sex going on. And eventually I convinced the pimp to start farming as well. It's true. And you can see the logo here. We took the brothels, the Leung lights, and this is an actual plant that we planted, the passion fruit. And this is a kind of bee, it's a black hornet that really pollinates the passion fruit. I'm not sure where it comes from. It lives somewhere within the city. And for me, the whole process, my revelation as a farmer is that I am a pimp in facilitating the sexing process of the plants. There was one afternoon when I see this like black hornet and like lying on top of the passion fruit flower and then really smashing it in a very passionate way. I was so satisfied, and I decided to put them on our logos. And this is not a joke, and for me it is something very real, very political. Because Hong Kong, if you review the Hong Kong's literary history, you will see she is not ashamed of comparing herself as prostitutes. You will see numerous cultural products from novels to poems to films that compare Hong Kong as a city to a prostitute. And for a long time, yes, we have been very open to international capital, and we have been open to the British government's colony, and I think we are one of the least resistant colonies among all the colonies. And we are really used to comparing ourselves to prostitutes. And I've been reading feminist texts from Japanese feminists, and they did a long, in-depth research on how prostitutes gain their own agency. And it's apparently that we have common myth or misconception that the price of a prostitute is the price that the customer think she is valued, right? So you're worth maybe 1,000 or you're worth 2,050, but the case, it is not the real case. According to the research of Japanese feminists, the price of the prostitutes is the price of the customer, is how the prostitute thinks that the customer is worth. And often it is that price is a tool to shame the customer. So in some more developed red light industries, the customers have to bid for the prostitute. It's not that because the prostitute is very talented and very beautiful, but to show that he is capable of paying that price. He is someone of a high social status, so that he can afford to pay that price. So it is in a very awkward way that the prostitutes can gain some sort of resistance and agencies in this process. And since Hong Kong has always compared herself to a prostitute of international capital, I'm thinking maybe one way of resistance in this process is, of course, it's not denying our filthy past, not denying this is the fact that we are a international capital, money laundering city, but to make use of this identity and gain our agency in the resistance. And so that's why I did a lot of transgression in this process. And I put a lot of literature that I read from local literature, from Sushi Wong, and also from, I'm not sure if you know about another work, it's called Butterfly, but not Madame Butterfly. Yeah, it's from a Malaysian writer about Hong Kong. And it's also about a prostitute from China. So I put a lot of these transgression, and I have been thinking that that land development does not only represent himself in one way, that the clean and green and positive ways, but the shameful and dark and sexing and the filthy part of this process. And in this transgression, we could develop some sense of self-worth and some sense of will to revolt, and that's what I've been doing. And a short response to Lai's presentation of her projects in the New Territories. She mentioned the word primitive several times. As I said, choosing of crops is a very political process, and what they are doing is very political because they are using the land as an imagination, as a container of their imaginative future. I would say that they are in no sense primitive. So the Hong Kong's farming movement is not a primitive movement. Hong Kong's rural area, rural villages, those villages that are facing eviction nowadays, they are already modernized from day zero. And that is exactly what government is wrong about. They thought that these are virgins. They thought that, oh, these are just backward people, I can just clean them away and then we allocate them and then we can build something modernized. No, they are already modernized. They are already developed. They live with full Wi-Fi, come on, and they have access to internet. Only that they live a different form of life. Very much Hong Kong, but different. And that is the imagination I want to implant in tonight. That people like Lai, they are in no way returning to an ancient cave-like form of life. They are reinventing the future, reinventing the present. And for me, my part would be like putting a lot of sex in the process. And I think it comes with my gender background and also my study of feminism, that sex is a very important part of your self-independence and development of your mentality of the self, of you owning your own future. And that's why often sex is described to be the last frontier of women's equality, that gaining the power and the access to eros and gaining the full control of your own life. And the same goes with the city. If Hong Kong has always been described as a passive prostitute, welcoming all these land developers, all these international capital and finance and foreign sovereigns, then what we do is not pretend to be a good girl. What we do is we embrace the image of a bad girl and try to deal with it and try to turn over, be on that upend.
Yeah, before the conversation, Holok has raised a very good point, which is very similar to what you said just now. Will not be a very efficient tool to help with the change of policy of Hong Kong or the relationship between Hong Kong and China. But at this moment, what Hong Kong people most need is this imagination of the future. They will need this urge to think about their future as a community. And by farming, it is a very great metaphorical way for them to imagine a collective future of Hong Kong. And this planting and reproduction and generating new output, this whole metaphor of farming can be used as what Hong Kong people can use for their future. And I think our time is almost.
I got all night. I didn't catch it.
I encourage you to pose questions to Michael about his research on land squatting, and I want to open the floor to the audience for you to pose questions to our three speakers.
Or any questions for his erotic stories.
Thank you. Thanks to all three and person to enlighten. It's a very complex issue. I'm also based in the UK, so I could have visited. I know. Okay, quick question. What do most Hong Kong people think of the politics of land and farming? I mean, ordinary citizens, different generations. I guess I'm asking because my parents were farmers and from Guangzhou and Hong Kong, but the generations differ in their views. I just wonder what do most Hong Kongers think of farming or land rights or identity?
Actually, I don't know most Hong Kong people. I know very few Hong Kong people. But take myself as an example. My parents are really against the idea of me participating in agriculture. I think they did whatever they can to stop me from getting contact with soil or household chores. Their biggest dream would be that me as an only son would be someone sitting in an office and enjoying the air conditioning. And that's their biggest dream. They are fugitive from a farming life. To most people from my parents' generation, farming or agriculture to them are painful memories, a life that they want to evade from. But here I am. So it's kind of a Sleeping Beauty scenario. So for me, I'm not trying to sustain myself with agriculture, but for me, I'm making a story for myself. Soil is important for my development of independence and of the connection with the city. I very much remember there was one time when I was marching in the city with barefoot. I can feel my skin touching the concrete. And that moment, I suddenly feel that I connect to the city. That what I do right now could affect its future. I possess the power to alter the city, the future of this city. And that was this moment that I think that I become a true Hong Kong. And for most of my life before, I was really apathetic. I never see, whenever I see the fireworks across the Victoria Harbour, I would think, that's not me, that's not my Hong Kong, that's not my prosperity. But after those demonstrations and after knowing and learning, researching about the Hong Kong's land policy and farmlands, I feel that I'm connected to them. finally on the same boat.
I think for most of the Hong Kong people, they will have a very stereotype thinking about the land issue. There's lack of land and housing problems. And so we had to stop farming, and that's the government want to push the idea on the Hong Kong people. But I think that is the case of what we should do or what we could easily do. Because to me, if Holok saying that Hong Kong is an ideal place or whatever, to me, after practicing farming in Hong Kong, I can say Hong Kong might be one of the idealistic place for land to do farming because of the weather and because of the natural resources. And for example, Samukun, we even rely on the hillside stream. We are not using the tap water. And there are quite a number of lands, like 4,000 hectares land, though most of them were abundant. And so that's the need or actual urge of an individual to do farming. So what I say, it inspires physically, it flourishes physically and mentally. So this is the way we should do it. But I know it's really difficult in Hong Kong, but because that is difficult, so we have to do it. So that I was not.
Yeah, my parents also discouraged me from doing any farming activity, and I still live in the city. And I forgot to mention that we also run a street market stall, which is literally one of those green metal sheds on the street. And I've been with some friends conducting farming activities there, literally on the road, on the street. Neighbours come past every day, and maybe they're perhaps half an hour, a couple of hours a day. And they're really encouraging. It's almost like there's a lack of these green spaces in the city. And some of you might know there's a leisure cultural services department who allocate small plots of land, but they're very, when I say small plots, I mean 2 meters by 2 meters to urban residents. But they're also very difficult to get through a kind of lottery system. There's only a certain amount of allocated plots in each area. And so by farming on the street, I'm able to kind of see this demand, or this need, this latent desire to get hands dirty. But also, by farming on the street, I also get other kind of odd kind of criticisms. And one I received yesterday, which I'm still kind of wrestling with in my mind. And one of the shop owners told me that this is the street, you shouldn't be farming here. If you want to farm, go to the new territories. So I'm happy that they have this awareness that there is still farmland in the new territories.
You know what my parents would say? If you want to farm, go to China. Never shows.
So then I posed the question to this shop owner. I said, well, must the city be completely grey? Can't we have green spaces within the city, like the High Line in New York, for example? And then she really paused for a long time and thought about that question. And she didn't answer it. She probably never will. But there was that kind of short pause, which I thought was somewhat optimistic. And to kind of continue on from this idea of disappointment. Yeah, it's easy when I haven't been in Hong Kong for a long time, but the kind of land farming process that I have been attending, I would say it is easy to get easily disappointed. But it's kind of really important that we have platforms like here and the farming on the street or farming in new territories, and even what these other farming activities happening on the rooftop. I see us all as one community, and yeah, when we come together and perhaps self-organise, we could kind of pave the way for a new agricultural movement and kind of oppose or at least push for some sort of agriculture policy in Hong Kong, which clearly isn't evident right now.
I think for tonight's discussion to be meaningful at all, we really have to answer the question, why Hong Kong? Like, it seems evident for us, okay, but how about for you guys? Why Hong Kong? Why do you have to know about all this? I think it's a question for you too, like, apart from like being more knowledgeable. I think for my parents' generation, development and green are contrasting concepts. You either have development or green. So if you want to go farming, you go to China. I evade from farming to come to this city so that you could like work in a bank. So then why go back to that miserable world? And Lai practices permaculture, and one element, one principle of permaculture is the problem is the solution. The problem is the solution. So in green movement, we often heard that, oh, humans are the Earth's cancer. So we are cancer to the Earth, we are destroying it. And I often question that notion. I never see myself as a cancer cell. And I actually have a friend who has cancer, and he has cancer cells all over him, so that he got these spots on his skin. And I asked, oh, are you like, do you hate your cancer cells? How do you like, what do you do with your cancer? Like, yeah. And he said, I named them. Like, oh, I see them as islands. My skin is the ocean, and my cancer cells are the islands, and I name them. And sometimes they feel very painful, and I would say, come on, give me a good time. I talk to them. And so it makes me think that can we be the good cancer cells? Like this global capitalism seems unstoppable. And I think many of the people who work in Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, they do have a good sense of like how climate change is destroying the world. And so, but they are part of the system. But the truth is no one is outside of the system. We are all cancer cells, okay? But can we be the good cancer cells? Can we be, like when we are criticizing the big corporations, can we put ourselves into that picture? And for me, there's no better place to farm than in Hong Kong, a global financial center. If you want to stop that capital influx and this crazy development mentality, there's no better place to start it with Hong Kong. And that's my idea. Why Hong Kong? Why not farming in a deserted, abandoned farmland somewhere in China? Why it has to be Hong Kong in the heart of the global financial city? I would say that if we are the problem, if all our, with the Panama paper and the British Virginia island money laundering mechanisms that's happening right here, right now, well, the most effective and efficient way to start a change would be like work it from here to cut a gap and to reveal an alternative future.
And so I've always kind of had this understanding. Well, when I was growing up in New York City, I kind of knew about my cousins and kind of fantasized about this like beautiful chicken farm where there's like running free and stuff when I was growing up in Manhattan. So it wasn't until I kind of came to Hong Kong and kind of had a little bit of an understanding of what farming looks like here. And it's been very much like a family business, like very passed down through, I don't know how long that part of the family has been here, but for a very long time. But my question kind of discusses how we've talked a lot, you guys have talked a lot about how farming is kind of an idealistic solution and how it's kind of representative of something, but I kind of wanted to flesh out like what exactly is that something. Like if China has a 5-year plan which includes merging Hong Kong with Shenzhen, then what does Hong Kong's 5-year plan look for itself, really?
I guess I can start answering that. When we were talking before the conversation started, I asked Holok a question. So from a man mindset, if the landholder in Hong Kong are so eager to sell their land, they decided that regardless of their tenants' desire, they're going to do it anyway. And the Chinese government decided that they are putting inland developers to come in and to build skyscrapers in new territories. Does it mean that there is no way of us, converting this current situation? And he said yes. This basically is, there's no plan for Hong Kong actually. The landholders are the ones who are making the decision, and the land developers are the ones who are making investment on the land. And as long as the two parties agree, this whole thing can happen despite of what other people want. So I think I can start by saying that there's no plan. And Holok, is there anything you want to say?
I think you pose a really good question. What is the thing that we want? And it is unknown because nobody ever asked. Nobody ever asked this question. And we seldom ask ourselves too, because we are too used to being a tool and in service of somebody else, some other parties. How could a bunch of refugees organize themselves? If you look into the literature's references, citing most before the return or turnover of the sovereign, you see Calvino's Invisible City was cited a lot, and also Xixi, a local port, floating city, describing a city that is floating in midair, are cited a lot. And that is the mentality of these refugees. They feel that they belong here, they are going somewhere else, but they're not going anywhere else. So how could they come together and envision a collective future? That is really a question and information. And also, you can. I think we're lucky enough to witness this process actually in these decades to come. That people in Hong Kong are thinking about what they really want out of all these years frog-like mentality. And myth is also one thing that tells a lot. The mermaid that you see on the wall there is a recent discovery of that people talk about that Leung. Yeah. So it's not an aerial type of mermaid. So this is a kind of initiative by local historians and artists to try to form a collective ancient understanding of the people here. They are not like anything else. They are unfitted in any category. And this is how we understand ourselves. And you also see these installations here. I was talking to all these people, guests here, about a myth by local refugees from China, from Chaozhou, that they have this saying that the river that they located, their village, are filled with water ghosts, where the ghosts would drag the people and the kids into the river and drown them. So later there was a Chinese traditional god came and they celebrated the birthday of that god. And since then, no more kids were drowned. And so every year they will have a festival celebrating this festive event, and people will bid for the ceremonial objects in the process, and the highest bidder will get an unspoken authority over that village in the coming year. And it's very interesting because these people are all refugees, but they somehow come up with a myth that collects them together. And they can, and currently in the Northeast New Territory resistance, they are one of the strongest village in resisting the government's planning. And I think what we want is yet to be revealed, but maybe creating our collective myth would be a good way out. I'm not sure.
Thanks so much. This has been wonderful. It's been really interesting for me because I come from rural Canada. I mean, I grew up in a place that, my province had less than a million. So for me to come here, it's just been phenomenal. And it's interesting because you're talking about the farmers and the farmers who are working in the territories. And I'm wondering if you can clarify, I don't know, maybe you can clarify for me. Who owns the land? Who's selling it? Is it the farmers that are selling it to the developers? And the reason I'm thinking of this is because there's a parallel to what's happening in Canada in terms of the prairie provinces, the agricultural regions. So, I mean, I guess can you just clarify?
No one owns any land in Hong Kong. No, except St. John's Cathedral. There's a church in Central where they own the land, the plot of land that the cathedral is on. Apart from that, nobody owns.
So it's all government.
It's all government, and Hong Kong runs at Crown lease. That means, the land belongs to the Queen, and now belongs to the Hong Kong government. And all the developers in Hong Kong, they basically get a 99-year contract, rental contract from the government. And all the use of the word selling and buying in a land tenancy is basically a transfer of tenancy. And because since it's 99 years, so it's long enough to replace the real thing. But there's no one buying, no one truly owning any land. So that's why there's this rapid development in new territories. It's because the government owns the sovereign power to resume any land when they need it. So it's called a land resumption policy. And in terms of high-rise buildings, residential buildings, once the government purchase over 80% of the property rights of that building, they can force auction it. So regardless of the other 20% owner. So this is the situation in Hong Kong.
Do we have any more questions? If not, then thank you all for coming.